Welcome. My name is Barry Merrick. I'm co-founder and CEO at Ivy and the chapter chair of YPO Metro New York. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce all of you to Deanna Mulligan. Deanna, welcome. How are you today?
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, Barry.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm incredibly excited for our conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how smart companies can close the skills gap. And it's a pleasure to have you here right on the heels of your book launch yesterday. So congratulations on that. And to give everybody a little bit more context on you, so Deanna is the board chair and the former CEO of Guardian Life Insurance. And Fortune has named her one of 50 most powerful women in business, and Crain's New York Business recognized her as one of the 50 most powerful women in New York. And both of those publications did that 5 times each. So she's going to be an extraordinary guide for this conversation. And to get us started, Deanna, I want to ask you, what led you to write this book? What do you believe is so important in engaging with this topic, especially for all the business leaders dialing into this conversation?
Well, thanks, Barry, and hello to all the leaders on this call. I'm honored that you're here with me today. What got me to write the book? By the way, the title of the book is Hire Purpose, H-I-R-E, Purpose. How smart companies, as you said, how smart companies can close the skills gap. And so I wanted to bring in this sense of purpose into our daily lives and into the work we do. And the purpose for me in writing this book started back in the 2008, the Great Recession, where there was, massive unemployment and unemployment by professional people. And some of you may remember that or may have been graduating or caught up in that. People who never expected that they would be without a job really struggled during that time period. And I was arriving at Guardian at about that time period, and Guardian was not heavily affected by the Great Recession. Fortunately, we're a very conservative company, and we made it through in very good shape. But I was looking all around me at the carnage and saying, I never want to be that CEO. I never want that to happen at my company. I never want to be the one that has to put all of these people out in the street. So I started back then thinking about what is it that causes massive unemployment in our system, and how can we as leaders try to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So obviously it took a while from 2008 to today for the book to manifest itself, but I was doing a number of other things, in the meantime, but always gathering research for this book and having in the back of my mind that leaders have a big role to play in helping our society stay employed. I mean, what's more important as a societal value than having the people who live in the society be able to take care of their families and actually kind of realize some of their dreams?
Absolutely. It's an amazing and critical reminder for, what is that the deeper purpose of leadership, which is, ensuring that people are not just surviving, but also thriving over time. And we have this special role that we get to play. Share with us when you look at the landscape today in 2020, obviously COVID has changed some things too. But if you were to outline, like above and beyond COVID, even in the run up in the last couple of decades, last few years, what have been the key trends, and what would you say are the most critical challenges in the way of companies closing the skills gap, and also societally where we can close the skills gap through this higher purpose mentality?
Well, Barry, McKinsey is out with a new study that says 375 million jobs will change substantially over the next 10 years, meaning people in 375 million jobs will have to learn totally new skills. And on top of that, there's research that says 75 to 85 million jobs will just go unfilled. So that means people in the audience, young presidents, corporate leaders, people, who are members of Ivy over the next 10 years are going to have potentially a very hard time finding the people they need to grow their companies. And, we might not meet our potential as a society, as companies or as individuals if we don't have enough skilled people to help us grow. So it's a serious issue for this audience because people watching this conference today are going to be the next governors, the next senators, the next mayors, the next university presidents, the next CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And this is going to be a serious problem for people in leadership.
Absolutely. So a lot at stake. What would you say is specifically not working today?
Well, today, we kind of think you walk across the stage and you collect a diploma and that's it. Now, that's not true for members of Ivy. That's not true for members of YPO. But if you think about the broad swath of society, they think, oh, I graduated from high school, or oh, I graduated from college. I'm done with education. Now I'm going to go to work. Okay, but the world is changing very rapidly. We all know that. And we all know that even in the last 6 to 9 months with COVID, we've all had to learn new skills, right? And new ways of coping and new ways of running our businesses. Who is educating the people who don't have access to IV or YPO? Who is educating the people who are out there today working hard to take care of their families, making pizzas, driving Uber cars, answering phones at a call center? And how can we make sure that they have the skills to continue to be able to contribute and support their families? And how can we make sure that the people graduating from college today are going to have the skills that you need as you put them into your company? And as you have great ideas, you all have great growth ideas and you want to expand, how are we going to be sure that you're going to have the employees to do it? Because let's face it, we can only grow our company so big by ourselves, right? We can't grow our companies without skilled people. So this is a real issue in that today we're leaving people to their own sorts to figure out how to educate themselves. And that, just on the face of it, that doesn't seem to make much sense.
Got it. So when we think about, given this challenge, this gap that exists out there, share with us when it comes to a solution, before we dive into what the solutions are, when it comes to a solution and something as big and societal as this, who are the different parties involved? What is their key role and responsibility, the way you see it? So share with us more broadly, and then we'll dive into each area to see what can be done by different stakeholders.
Well, that's a great question, Barry. So who's responsible for solving this problem? This is a multi-dimensional problem, and it's going to have a multi-stakeholder solution. So government is clearly a stakeholder here. We can't just keep paying people unemployment. Well, we can, but that's probably not the ideal solution. Much better to educate people so they can be employed. Okay, so government definitely has a role. Educational institutions definitely have a role. And as we all know, educational institutions tend to be fairly traditional. Now, they're being forced to innovate a lot right now in COVID time, but your classic high schools, colleges, universities, or community colleges are going to be a part of the solution. Then we have businesses. Corporations themselves, big and small, are going to have to play a role in helping employees be reskilled. Then there's private sector entrepreneurs and organizations like Ivy and organizations like YPO. What can they do to help? And then finally, it's the individual. People are going to have to take more responsibility for their lifelong education and for developing a lifelong learning mindset than they typically do today. Now, of course, people on this call today are here because they have a learning mindset. But when you think about the broad collection of society, that may not always be the case.
All right, excellent. So we've got government, educational institutions, corporations, membership type groups, as well as individuals. Let's go bottoms up here. Let's start with the individual, okay? And then we can work our way up from the individual unit to society at large. So when it comes to the solution for closing the skills gap, what exactly are the solutions? And obviously, there are all kinds of individuals. So what would you say universally applies? And then what would you say to those who are maybe, let's say, more frontline workers versus those in leadership positions?
I think what universally applies is in our culture and in our companies and in our families, we have to develop this mindset of continuous learning. And it's, as you might say, a growth mindset that we can learn, we'll need to learn, and it's going to be part of our daily lives, just like brushing our teeth and exercising and eating and sleeping. Learning is going to be foundational and fundamental for everyone. And that applies to the frontline worker, that applies to the corporate CEO, that applies to everybody in between. So we start with that as a building block. Then we think about organizations that can help people learn and what is their role. So let's start with—
Before you go there, Deanna, sorry to interrupt. Just on the individual level, so you said, okay, we got to cultivate this learning mindset. Could you just share with us, like, I know it might sound like blatantly obvious, but like, what actually works, right? You run a very large company, you're still on its board, you're familiar with all kinds of other, you're on other boards. Like, how do you actually get people to embrace this? Because just saying, like, for example, if it was about physical fitness we're talking about, we would say, well, everybody should go to the gym. Okay, but they're not. So how do you get them to do it?
That doesn't work. And I think the gym is a great metaphor. So if you wanted everyone to go to the gym, you wouldn't just say, go to the gym. What would you do? You'd build a gym at your company, or you would provide a free or discounted gym membership, or you would run contests about who is the most fit in the company, or you would give people a half an hour at lunch to go work out in the gym. Well, the same thing is true with learning. You can't just say, upgrade your skills or have a learning mindset. But first of all, as the CEO or the president of your organization or a significant player in your organization, you can role model. You can talk about, I was on Ivy because I wanted to learn, and I go to YPO meetings and here's what I learn. And oh, by the way, when COVID started, I didn't really have the kind of Zoom skills I wanted to have, or whatever it is, right? And I had to learn how to light my background. So I looked, and just talk about your own learning journey, small, funny things, but larger, more important things too. I think it's very important to role model. Secondly, you have to make learning available. And what we do at Guardian is we have everything from free college courses online. You can come to Guardian as a high school graduate if you come as an intern and start working and start taking college courses online for free. So you can provide opportunities for people to learn. Then that's kind of extreme, earning a degree at Guardian. Not everyone's going to do that. Most people at this stage come with a degree. So then we have tuition reimbursement. So if you have something you want to learn, or you want to go to graduate school, we have tuition reimbursement. But what if you want to learn a skill that's really specific to your job? We have those. We have those courses online. We have used outside players like General Assembly, for example, a startup that's now owned by a big company that comes in and does custom courses around digital skills and rethinking data analytics and how do you do it, and everything from awareness skills to actual hands-on skills. And then we have things we call lunch bites. We have half-hour online courses that we put up for people, you know, from 12 to 12:30 or 12:30 to 1, so they can eat their lunch and learn a new skill. And we also have, very importantly, courses in career planning. Again, some of those are lunch bite type courses. Some of them are longer 10 or 12-week courses where we get people to really think about the job they're doing today, how they could do it better, how it might be done in the future, and what skills they might need to keep progressing in the company. And we offer them, you know, counseling on that so that people really start to take ownership of their career.
Excellent. So you basically, you're saying that individuals need to have this mindset, but in order for them to act on it, especially if they're spending a vast majority of their time at work, the employer almost sounds like you're not just creating a gym, but equivalent, but like it's almost like a campus where you know the learning is available and also sometimes bite-sized and specific or broad depending on what people need. So obviously you worked at a particularly large organization. what would you say are like the table stakes, some like a handful of things that every organization in your view should absolutely do? Like, for example, should each organization have one point person who owns learning and growth in the company? Should there be like things that you do as a company, you carve out time? What would you say are like table stakes? You gave really good ideas, but for those who are thinking, what do I do next week or before the end of the year on this? What would you say?
Well, for one thing, I think this applies to small and entrepreneurial companies as well as large companies. Obviously, Guardian's a very big company, but I have worked in and run startups as well. So if I had my own small company, what would I do tomorrow? I think I would have an all hands meeting and I would say, hey guys, I just took a class on learning and skills development. And I'm thinking about our next growth spurt, be it the next year or the next 5 years. What do you guys think we're missing? What could we actually do better? Or where do you think our competitors are kind of eating our lunch and we might have to upgrade? And I would get a couple of ideas. And then I would say, okay, let's go out and try to find some low cost ways to bring this skill to us. So it could be we make available, specific videos from Ivy, right, that have specific topics that are relevant to the learning of the people. And we're going to have a brown bag lunch, or we're going to have an afterward drink, and we're going to all watch this video together. And then we're going to talk about it. And we're going to say, okay, how can we apply this? Or I could go online as the CEO or the chief learning officer, if you have one. Now, in a small company, chief learning officer would probably be just one hat that someone is wearing. But I can go out there and say, hey, there's some really cool courses out there that I think our people should be aware of. And I'm going to, curate those and make them available. Or I'm going to say that everybody's going to devote an hour a week or 2 hours a week to learning, and everybody needs to kind of submit their learning plan. How are you going to use the 1 to 2 hours a week we're giving you paid? Let's talk about it. And I think what you would find is that people would be really excited. It would bond them more to you and the company, and they would probably come up with some really creative things that you might not have thought about.
Excellent. Okay, those are some really great ideas. Especially the one like that last one you mentioned. If you just say, okay, this is the time allocated, whether it's 1 or 2 hours a week or 1 or 2 hours a month, whatever people come up with, but like turning the tables to say, okay, we are carving out this time. Here are the resources we're making available. All we want to know is, what have you learned? Right? What's the skills? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll definitely come back to corporations and what employers can do, but just so we get the full picture here of the different kinds of organizations involved in this. So what's the role of the government in all of this? What's working and not working? And then, how does that interplay with educational institutions, public and private? So share with us, what's working, not working, and what do you think should be done to get us to the next level?
Well, maybe I can give you some examples, and I can give you some examples that I heard about and researched, and I know they're true. In a meeting like this a couple of weeks ago, someone said, "Oh, I worked in the previous administration in these skills centers that the federal government set up where people could go to get reskilled, but they never really got off the ground because there wasn't always a connection between the skills they were learning and if they were unemployed, and where they were going to go get a job tomorrow," right? So it's great for the government to offer skills training, but what people really need is, especially in periods of high unemployment, like now, for example, they need to know where to go to get a job. That's really what they want to know. And then secondarily, okay, where are the jobs available? And then how do I get the skills to get that specific job? So one example I know of is Rhode Island. Right now, the governor of Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo, is talking to CEOs of big companies and saying, hey, we want you to bring your needs to Rhode Island. And what is it that you need? What are the next 100, 200, 300 jobs you're going to hire? And if I make sure that Rhode Islanders are trained in whatever it is skills you need, will you in turn commit to come here and hire Rhode Islanders? And you don't have to come here. This is the great thing that we've learned during the COVID crisis. You don't have to come here physically. You might not even have an office here. You might not be relocated in my state, but we have virtual workers. And if you commit to hiring some of my workers virtually, I'll make sure that whatever skill it is you need, I'll train them. And then the government goes and works with the community colleges and the universities and finds a way to develop the appropriate training. Now that's just launching now. I think it's a very large scale pilot, but that seems to make a lot of sense, right? To say, hey, companies, you give me the jobs and I'll give you the workers, and I'll be the coordinator between the companies, the workers, and the educational institutions, the convener, if you will. That seems like a great role for government.
So are there any kind of really effective ways in which this is already working? The Rhode Island pilot sounds super compelling. Any ways in which currently companies and governments are speaking about this to leverage educational institutions in a successful way?
Well, sure. I think that it's working in a lot of places, maybe smaller than on a statewide basis. And certainly Europe provides endless models for this in terms of the, and maybe some of the people in your audience have experienced this, the mentorship and apprenticeship programs where many students in Europe go to high school for 2 years, take 2 additional years of training, and then go to work at a company, and the company helps provide additional training. I've seen small pilots of that going on in Chicago. We have Kentucky is a state, South Carolina, with the auto industries in both states who have done a lot of that kind of public-private partnership for training in order to attract, large-scale industries.
All right, excellent. So why don't we dive deep now into what are these coveted skills, right? What are the key things? Like if we want to make our employees, quote unquote, bulletproof in terms of adaptability, no matter what happens, the next thing that the world throws at us. But also as individuals, if we want to be bulletproof ourselves and adaptable ourselves, what are the recurring themes in terms of what skill sets are super important, are going to become, and also going to become increasingly more important? Also, on the flip side, where do you think there's maybe too much focus on certain skills that you think it's being overdone and it's at the expense of these things that are going to become increasingly more important?
Well, that's a great question, Barry, because a lot of people say to me, and we cover all the different types of skills in the book, but a lot of people have said to me before the book came out, well, this book is about skills and retraining. It must be all about technology. Well, yes and no. Of course, technology is changing rapidly and it's changing at an increasing pace. And I think this COVID shutdown has forced companies to move even faster on certain digital and automated and IT skills. So we've put things into production at Guardian much faster than we normally would have because we had high customer call volume. So we put into place, some artificial intelligence bots to answer calls, and people are talking to bots and they don't realize it. Instead of taking the normal 6 to 9 months to really pilot that and work out the kinks, we had so many calls that we threw it into production, in 2 weeks, and it worked, right? And it answered 70% of the calls it received. And I've heard stories from other companies that said, oh, wow, there's a crisis here, so we're just innovating more rapidly to solve all these problems. So there's an example of the kinds of skills where automation, that's been a skill that's been around for a while, but even more jobs I think you're going to find being automated in this environment. Data analytics is a skill that's in very high demand right now. It's very hard to hire PhD data analysts, really almost impossible. And I could tell you a story later, and it's in the book, about how we retrained some people at Guardian to become data analysts. We have a group of PhDs, but we couldn't hire enough. So we decided to develop a course to have some of our own people who are skilled in math become data analysts. So that's a skill that's been around for a while, in demand, and it continues to be. I think you'll see all kinds of digital marketing. Yeah, that again, that's been a hot skill for a while. I think COVID really increased the number of people, you see it, who are shopping online, doing everything online. Video production is a skill that's really emerged with COVID as being in short supply. Look at us right now, everything's on video. But any kind of skill like that is dependent upon the time period you're in. So, what do you really need? Those skills are going to keep changing. The soft skills are really important. We want people who are flexible, entrepreneurial, who can see the change coming, self starters, self motivators, who can go out and say, hey, I see there's going to be a need for this and I want to be there. I want to go where the puck is, so to speak. And so maybe they push leadership a little bit and say, help me learn this new skill. So flexibility, ingenuity, creativity, entrepreneurship, and in big companies, collaboration, because none of these digital skills work well in silos. You need people who can reach out and collaborate with other people. Now, if you think about what you traditionally learn in an educational institution, it's not always. Some colleges and some high schools are great at teaching entrepreneurship and flexibility and motivation and creativity and new ways of thinking and self-startership. But some are still kind of in that old mode of you come and you learn what we tell you to learn, and you memorize things and we test you. So I think we have to make sure that people really do have the soft skills that they're going to need in this environment of continuous change.
Excellent. I love how, I mean, it's kind of like the hard skills you mentioned initially, right? Automation, data analytics, digital marketing, video production. One day that might include virtual reality or whatever is
Exactly.
like but these soft skills, right? These human skills, I
Mhm.
mean, that were, you're not going to have machines, focused on like being flexible, entrepreneurial, collaborative, and so
Yeah.
on. So this interpersonal human skill seems to be the highest, but obviously, I mean, both at undergrad and graduate school and the institutions I got to attend, I mean, it was kind of like expected you figure those things out because you were studying the academic topics. Whereas in the real world, obviously, all business is people business, no
That's
matter
right.
what you're doing. Um, so could you share with us what you found? Like sometimes it's easier to just purchase a data analytics course for a subset of employees. When it comes to soft skills, what has been working best? And how do you engage people from across the company? Because some companies think, well, people skills, that's like our salespeople and client managers, right? Whereas the reality is internally, everyone is working with each other. So share with us what has worked really well when it comes to soft skills.
Okay, I'll give you a couple examples. I'll give you quick bites that we've done, and then I'll go to the other end of the spectrum and longer, more formal courses. So quick bites. When we have our leadership team meetings or our all hands teams meetings, we like to have speakers that come in and help people do just a mini, skills development exercise. So one of the more memorable meetings, we had Marshall Goldsmith come in, who's an author and a leadership trainer. And he said, okay, grab the person you're standing next to. We're going to learn how to give feedback. And that, you're going to take turns asking for feedback and then giving feedback. And a lot of people don't like to give face-to-face feedback. But if you think about it, being a manager or leader, the best thing you can do for your people is give them feedback on their performance and help them to grow. So people were a little shocked. Well, I don't really want to give feedback to the guy sitting next to me from IT, or maybe today I'm sitting next to my best friend and Marshall's telling me I have to give them feedback on something they don't do well. And we also practice self-disclosure. Okay, disclose something about yourself. And that was a little 1 hour exercise, but we got enormously good feedback from people about, hey, I learned a lot in that hour. And then Marshall gave tips before and after. He let people do it once and he said, how about doing it this way? They tried it again, felt much more comfortable, were able to give much more usable feedback. So just having those little, again, learning opportunities in an hour can make a big difference and can really cause someone to want to learn more and to go seek that out. We go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And in terms of leadership training, I try to find ways that people in the middle levels of the organization can go to some of the things I go to, or can meet some of the people I meet. So in New York City, I'm a member of the Economic Club of New York and on the board, and they offer Economic Club of New York fellows the opportunity to come to economics lectures, to debate, to learn more about the economy from experts. And, that program ends up, they go to the New York Fed and they have lunch with the chair of the New York Fed. So I try to find opportunities like that for our middle level people to really have meaningful interaction with senior people and leaders in the community, leaders outside of Guardian, to think about leadership and to learn leadership styles and leadership platforms. And that's a year-long multi-meeting course. So everything from 1 hour bites where they can learn from experts and learn by doing, to year-long courses that are harder to put together and a little more involved, but still I try to think about what's going to help people to grow.
Excellent. So from there, my key takeaways is using these potentially like more inspirational individuals, things that bring you out of your everyday, but doing it in a peer-to-peer fashion, like experientially, whether it's going to the Fed. I mean, obviously, if you get to do that, but also if it's a little lunch and learn for an hour in the company, but having people self-disclose and become an owner in the learning, as opposed to just watch this video and then carry on, keep calm and carry on. This is more about like actually, like learn this thing and then discuss with each other and share and commit.
Yes, absolutely. Just as you do at Ivy, right? Learning in groups. We talked about that before.
Yeah. I mean, at Ivy, but also that's what was the best part of college or business school for me was, the fact that it was so interactive. So you automatically supported each other and kept each other accountable because you were living through it together. And I feel like companies are such an incredible, it's like a petri dish for the same thing where people are together all the time anyway. So the opportunity is huge. Share with us, so based on everything you've learned on your journey and also writing this book, like crystallizing all those learnings over the years, what are you specifically most excited about? Like as far as like key initiatives, whether it's corporate, government, or not-for-profit realm, how are you bringing, like in addition to your book, how are you pushing these initiatives forward?
Well, I'm really excited about the response I've seen to my book so far. Business leaders are really concerned about skills development, and they understand that the world is changing so rapidly that even a master's degree from a prestigious institution isn't going to take you through your whole life. You're going to have to continue to learn something new every single year. And so I think corporate leaders, government leaders, not-for-profit leaders, they're grasping that concept and they're worried, and they see these numbers, let's say 375 million jobs are going to change. So I think this is an idea whose time has come. And of course, with COVID, sadly, tragically, we have a lot of unemployed people in this country. So I'm excited about my next stage in life. I hope I can be part of that problem-solving group that gets in there and says, okay, how do we help these people retrain? If you're in the hospitality industry today and there aren't enough jobs, how do you hop into healthcare, right? How do you take the skills you might have had as a salesperson in a retail store and become a digital, online, virtual salesperson, right? So I think there's a challenge, a big challenge to our country right now, but there's also a big opportunity for people who want to play leadership roles to say, let's figure this out. I'm very passionate about that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Before we dive into the audience Q&A, I've got one more question for you. For everybody who's participating live, highly encourage you to now think about, okay, based on everything Deanna shared, what's a key action item for you? What's a key question that you might have? Any questions you have, please post it into the Q&A box. and we'll get through as many of them as possible. Deanna, my last question before we switch to the audience is just share with us a vision, okay? Imagine that a lot of these things that make so much sense and make so much common sense, let's say companies and governments and educational institutions and NGOs and membership organizations, let's say we all push this forward. What does that world look like? Like, what is the North Star here? What are we going for? And maybe that will help galvanize us and crystallize better in our minds what the key actions are that we need to take.
I think in the perfect world where all those institutions you just mentioned were really working together to maximize our ability to learn, you would see productivity skyrocket, not just in this country, but around the world. You would see more opportunity, not only for people like us who are in leadership positions, but more opportunity for people who haven't had the opportunities that we have to date in terms of education. Their world could open up dramatically. And as we skill these people even more, as we make sure they have the skills for tomorrow, it's going to be a rising tide that lifts all boats. So imagine our standard of living going up dramatically. Imagine being able to really eliminate a lot of unhappy unemployment. Imagine being able to afford as a country, as a consequence of that, better healthcare and better housing and more education for people. So this kind of working together to really bring everybody along on the skills development process, it's a virtuous upward cycle, right? And I'm very excited about that as a North Star.
Yeah, absolutely. I got goosebumps as you described that. So couldn't agree more. What an awesome vision that's also so eminently achievable if we work together and have the right focus. So thank you for all of this, Deanna. I'm going to jump into the audience Q&A now. First question is from Jeffrey Buckler, who asks, how has the transition to remote work changed the approach to engagement and training?
You know, that's a very good question. And obviously, we've had to figure out, just as we've had to figure out how to run our business remotely, we've had to figure out how to continue our learning culture remotely. And we've done a number of different things. We've had some learning challenge contests and fun things that we've just done online and moved to Zoom. We've continued to offer our lunch bites courses. We're doing it virtually now instead of in person. We're continuing to have speakers. We're continuing to have all hands meetings with speakers who we had Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote, you know, the books on networking. We had him not too long ago come and speak to us all virtually about how to build your network. So we've had to be creative about moving this online, but we did not leave it behind, you know, in the scramble to run the whole company virtually. And we're really running entirely virtually right now. We made it a point to bring along our learning culture and our learning opportunities for people to the online world. And it's working. As you all know, it's different. Everything is different. It's different, but it's working.
Excellent. Next question is from Dan Carlton, who asks and says, my thinking is that soft skills should be formally taught in high school and college. Is this a reasonable idea?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that's an excellent thought. If you think back to your own high school years, wouldn't it have been great to have some courses in empathy, some courses in communications, and maybe we did have courses in public speaking and debate, but we didn't all have the opportunity to take them. But making those kinds of courses mandatory, having a mandatory course in high school about how to chart out your life. What do you want to be? You know, what do you really want to be? Not just where do you want to go to school, but what kind of leader do you see yourself being? How high could you go? You know, those kinds of things being taught at the high school level. At the college and university level, I think you are starting to see some interpersonal dynamics courses, for example, being taught. I know most of the business schools now have those kinds of courses, but to make it, to bake that into the curriculum so that even in an economics course or a statistics course, there are pieces of it that are highly interactive or pieces of it that are student-led. just to give people the opportunity to continually practice those soft skills, I think is going to be really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Deanna. Next one from Diego Velez, who asks, what are the skills a human talent manager should have at this point in time?
Diego, that's a good question. Talent managers have a big job, right? And I think that talent managers can't do it all themselves. So in addition to the things that you might think about, I think talent managers need to be able to manage up in the organization at this point and manage across, and to get their leadership team and their colleagues really engaged and excited about this opportunity we have to reskill everybody. It's not just the job of HR. It's not just the job of the talent manager. So I think the talent manager can be the evangelist in the organization for these kind of ideas, but can't do everything himself or herself.
Excellent. Thank you, Deanna. Next one from Armando Beltran, who asks and says, not all CEOs have the same clear view on learning as you do, and constantly demand their HR leaders for return on investment metrics on any spend in the development for their associates. What metrics have you seen work? What would you advise to those CEOs?
A very good question, and I often get asked about the economics, and there's lots of studies that have been done, but you could do this in your own organization. You could sit down and use your own numbers, that to fire someone and then rehire someone with different skills costs 5 to 6 times as much as training that person. And I think if you sat down and worked through, what are the severance costs? What are the recruiting costs? What is the downtime? You know, if you fire someone and have to rehire someone, what is the quote unquote wear and tear on the culture? How many people really feel devalued and discouraged when they see somebody being fired and a new person being rehired? And what is the upside? Training doesn't cost very much. You know, you can do a lot with a couple $1,000s in terms of training, and a lot of training is available free. So what is the upside, the potential we could have if we made use of some of these training resources that are out there and people became more productive, right? Even a 2, 3, 4% improvement in productivity, or an improvement in employee engagement. We measure employee engagement. We found engagement goes way up when you practice this kind of learning culture. People become very bonded to the organization because they see you as taking a real interest in them, and they see what you're offering in terms of skill development as being really important to their future. They'll stay, they'll work hard to continue. They want to continue to be a part of that team. They'll work hard to continue to earn their place. So I would start looking at some of those kind of metrics.
Just to ask you to build on this, Deanna's powerful answer that you shared, but specifically, right? So when you have this lunch and learn and somebody comes in and you do a workshop and people feel like that was really great, what are the, like, is it fine for a talent manager to say, look, everybody had a great time. They gave it a high score out of 10. They learned stuff and I'm sure we'll get the benefit. Like, is that sufficient of an answer to CEOs, or like, how do they show them something more complete for the more numerically obsessed managers out there?
Well, you're not going to get the lift that you want just doing 1 or 2 of those things. So you have to show how they all fit together. But I think it's fair to say to the people in the class, look, we want to be able to provide more of these. But in order to provide more of these, we have to get some use cases. We're going to come back to you in 2 weeks and we're going to ask you all how you use this. And we want you to give a story of how your productivity improved, or your relationship with the next department improved, or you were able to shave time. And you start collecting those stories. And sometimes with senior executives, you know, metrics work, but if you're just starting up and you don't have a lot of metrics, sometimes anecdotes work. Say, look, you know, Joe reached out to somebody in manufacturing and he was able to prevent some mistake from being made, or he was able to make an adjustment that made the customer happier. And, you know, it didn't cost us much. It cost us an hour at lunch, and he got a new idea and it caused him to take this action. And just think, if we multiplied this by 10 or 20 or 100, you know, where we would be. I think you have to be a little creative in the beginning, but I think if you do enough of these things over time and start measuring, eventually, you know, you'll get the hard metrics as well.
Excellent. And just to build on that, I think, so if you actually tie the learning two specific action items that
Mhm.
they, or one action item, if you, for
Mhm.
example, say, we hosted this, that was great.
Mhm.
Everybody commit to one action they're going to
Mhm.
take in a month and report back on how it went. That could help develop all those
Right.
anecdotal ones. Also, people could also say, well, it was, I was
Absolutely.
this much better, and they could figure out how numerically that works. So thank you for that, Deanna. Next one is from Greg Stewart. He says, thank you for this great discussion. For the skill development and training provided by the company, the presenters, OT meetings, etc., what are your best practices for retaining and sustaining the learnings in those sessions in the weeks and months following?
That's a great question, because follow-up is really important. And it's easy to get excited about one or two concepts, do the training, and then get excited about another concept or a different concept or a different speaker and move on to the next one. So I think repetition is really important. And so if you have a great all hands meeting and you have a speaker come in and talk about the growth mindset, then you need to sit down right then and there and calendar out, okay, for the next year, once a month when we have our brown bag lunch or our snack and learn or whatever it is, we're going to bring up the growth mindset again. And we're going to ask people to raise their hands and talk about how they use it. We're going to spend 5 minutes once a month at whatever meeting that we have regularly and ask people to share. And by doing that, you keep that in the top of your mind. There's nothing like repetition. You might have grasped the concept the first time and put it into play, but if you want the entire organization to do it, you have to use repetition.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So repetition, integration, whatever you can
Mhm.
keep bringing the concepts back to life. Excellent. Deanna, what I'd love to ask you next is, and just to help us like kind of crystallize this conversation that's been so amazing, share with us what are the best ways in which our community can best support you, your endeavors, this incredible cause that you care about. If you could share that specifically, because I think many of us are
Mhm.
galvanized to get more engaged, do our best, obviously, in our lives and companies, but also to support you. So please share with us what that would be. And then if you have any final words of wisdom or very specific call to action for all of us to keep in mind to help us wrap this up, that would be really valuable as well.
Okay. Well, evangelization of this concept. What could you do when you leave this meeting today? First of all, post on whatever social platforms you have. Hey, I went to this meeting and we talked about continuous learning and taking personal responsibility for learning, and just getting the word out that this is going to be a major tool for our society going forward in order to make a more just society, more equitable society, more diverse society, and a more productive society. So learning is really connected to all the societal goods we want. So to get that word out there among you, your peer group is the next generation of powerful leaders. And so if you can start talking about it with your peer group now, 10 years from now, we won't face 85 million unfilled jobs and we won't face massive social unrest. And we will be more diverse if we can get that word out now. So you can take a simple step, leave and go post something on your social platform. 2, you can go back to your company and talk to the people in it and say, hey, if we could all learn one new skill, what do you think would be the most useful for us? And have a 10-minute conversation, and you're going to learn something, I think, really interesting, and your people will find it fun, right? It's fun to talk about that. It's fun to dream about the future and talk about being more productive. So go talk to your people about one skill that they would like to learn or you could learn, and then go research a way to bring that skill development into the company inexpensively. If you do those 3 things, you're going to start on a journey that's going to pick up and feed itself, and that would be very helpful. So finally, what are my key tips here? If you really are committed to this, what's the 3 best tips I have for making your organization a learning organization? So number 1, start small. It's great to go back to your desk and go, wow, we're going to be a learning organization and we're going to have 500 courses and we're going to train everybody all at once. I would say go back to your desk, start small, pick one problem with one group of employees and say, hey, we know we have this problem in shipping. We know we have this problem in video production. if we could solve it using new skills, what skills would you guys like to have? What do you think we need to do that we're not doing today, skills-wise, in order to solve this problem? Start there. So start small, expect and accept failure. Learning is called learning for a reason. You're not always successful. You learn by doing. The first attempt isn't always perfect. And so the people who are learning a new skill are not going to be as productive as the people who already know it. So you have to build in some room for learning and some time for failure. So start small, expect and accept some failures. And then I think the most important one is build a learning culture. Talk about it, cheer it on, reward it when you see it. Build a learning culture. Those are my 3 tips for how you can take the message that's in my book and really roll it out in your organization.
Excellent, Deanna. That was great. We've pasted a link in the chat to everybody who's interested in Deanna's new book, Higher Purpose, in case you want to dive deeper into this or share it with key colleagues who you're going to collaborate with to implement some of these ideas. I love, Deanna, your 3 immediate calls to action, and the skills were both amazing. So posting something about the role, importance of continuous education, just asking people what the skill would be that they'd want to learn, and then pick one and make it happen. I think that's a very low-hanging fruit. There's no reason not to do that. So I'm glad that you helped crystallize that for us, and excited to see how everybody does. And maybe we check in with them a month later and see how did that go to get those anecdotes. So thank you for being here. Congratulations again on your book. And we're all very excited to support you on this journey. And it was a privilege to have you here for the hour.
Thank you, Barry. I'm honored to be here with so many future leaders. And, when I'm old and doddering, you guys are going to be running the country, and I'm so excited about that. It's going to be great. And thank you for what you do here at Ivy to continue to educate people. And your mission is continuous education. It's great. Our missions are so aligned. So I'm thrilled to be here today. And thank you, everyone, for spending your precious time with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Deanna. On behalf of everybody, we really appreciate it too. Hope to see you again soon. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. See you all again soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.